you underestimate the population you're compared to. And the market is tight these days. So chances are, unlike 3, 4, 5 years ago, these days, a lot of people have practiced for that. So if you don't, you just short-circuiting yourself, like you're handicapping yourself for no good reason whatsoever.
Hey, this is Kevin Landucci with Apply Pass. The difference between getting a rejection or a down level as opposed to passing an interview at the level you want to pass is mainly about presentation. In this video, you'll see a former FANG engineer, Dima, and negotiation coach and communication coach, Kevin Landucci, coach a senior engineer to make sure he's presenting himself to be as senior as he actually is so he can avoid down levels and pass his interviews for the level that he wants. Hope you like it.
Hey everyone, I'm a senior software engineer and I want to make sure that I'm portraying myself that way in interviews. I was working at Cruise for 7 years, and before that I did an advanced data structures PhD.
So here's the thing. I met you in person. I know you're a senior engineer. I know you absolutely rock it. So let's make sure that whoever else sees you over a small tiny window on the screen has the same impression as I did.
Beautiful. Cool, Alex. Why don't you just start with whatever you would normally start with in an interview when they ask you to tell them a little bit about yourself or walk them through your resume or whatever poorly worded question that they ask, but you know what they're asking is impress us in a short amount of time.
So most recently I was working at Cruise. I joined as one of the first 100 engineers. And by the time I left last August, I think there was around, there was a few thousand though. And so joining that early, I was working on the route planning team and I built a lot of the core routing engine and fine-grained controls for that and tooling and like tools for debugging and simulation to help drive the direction of the company. So I was there for 7 years. Before that, I was working on compressed data structures during my PhD in Tokyo. The highlight of that was I co-invented a compressed graph that compressed a single human genome graph from 300 gigabytes of RAM to 2 gigabytes of RAM. So that's me.
Nice. I have a question. So, Alex, imagine that you're an interviewer and you are doing an experiment where you're going to base the entire interview off of follow-up questions from a candidate's introduction.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So everything they lay out in the introduction is the only stuff that you can investigate from there. If you were an interviewer that just heard you give that intro, how curious would you be about carrying that through to a whole interview?
I think I'd probably lean on the PhD thing. I think that sounds really interesting, but maybe there's not enough, I guess, like driving company decisions with the routing stuff, the simulation stuff. That's interesting, but I don't think it really hooked. It wouldn't hook who I was talking to.
I had topics to ask you about, maybe like tooling or routing, but I didn't have a technical achievement, as in when you reduced the
300 gigabytes to 2.
Yes. Yeah. That I could be like, oh, how cool. I would love to hear how you did that. Over here, I had nothing that made me say, oh, how cool. How did you do that? Because they were all topics.
Mm-hmm.
So I could say, tell me more about that, but I couldn't say, I wonder how he accomplished that, and I'd like to hear more. So personally, I think that that would be one thing that I would maybe think about in the intro. And I would wonder if there would, like, just talking to me, not in mock interview mode, what might be some other breadcrumbs that you might leave, just like the reducing the gigabytes of RAM, but for the Cruise work. Yeah.
Can I chime in real quick?
Yeah.
So given we established that in your self-presentation, the part that is at the end was more inviting for questions, two things. One is you actually short-circuited yourself because obviously you want to present your
senior
accomplishments over the past 7 years, not before, right? But the easy trick to turn this to your advantage is to start from that. You can just begin your story by saying, hey, so I did a PhD in advanced data structures. It was super cool. we managed to fit the whole human genome onto a small flash drive back then, over 100 times improvement. So that's already intriguing, right? And then we can talk about Cruise. And then the interviewer can safely choose between either options. And if they choose to talk about the genome thing, it's not going to sound as if they don't care about your Cruise work. It's going to sound as if they're going chronologically, which is what you want.
Yeah, but more than chronologically, it's about emphasis. In a sentence, the last word of a sentence is what's emphasized. That's just how English works. So the last words of your intro are what's emphasized. So Dima, that's a fantastic point, is if we emphasize the PhD, they will be led to ask questions about the PhD. Great. Yeah. So yeah, Alex, let's outline a few bullet points that you could use to use as breadcrumbs for Cruise. How can we encapsulate the routing stuff in Austin in a really quick soundbite, just like what Dima said, of reduce the human genome to like the size of a small thing? Yeah.
Well, I think there's like being one of the first 100 engineers. This is not the Austin thing, but being one of the first 100 engineers working on some really core things to the routing engine. I was pivotal in a demo day where we got $2.25 billion of investment from SoftBank. So I think that's an interesting thing to throw in there.
Yes. So put that to the side. Great. Right. What else?
And then, sorry. I guess the other thing that I was most well known for being the owner of these tools that I mentioned. Yeah. And the tools were used by 100 or more technical and non-technical staff.
I thought the way that Dima phrased it last time was the tooling for blank was immature when I joined, but I took lead on this and got investment to make it better. Something like that.
And do mention that. Yeah. And do mention that what you did, what you built, what you shipped, is not only used consciously as in people running that, but also it runs behind the scenes through every single commute of every single engineer because it's super critical for the company. That's major.
Yeah. Those are three big ones right there.
Yeah, I guess I could just make a stronger statement. The word tooling sounds weak.
Tooling, yeah.
You can do better. What you build are not tools. What you build are enablers in many ways. Both
Say that again, Dima. What's the word? What's the word?
Enablement.
Enablement?
Like tooling to me sounds a bit like plumbing. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, tons of interesting work in engineering has to do with data pipelines, and that's a lot like plumbing. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. But when you say tooling, it's like you help someone do the job. Your tools did the job, so it's more than a tool. It's an instrument. It's a living being that makes you guys excel at your job. The whole company improves thanks to you, not because it builds a tool. So I have an idea here, by the way.
Yeah.
So we talked about this offline. Like part of your ethics is tied to Japan, so you're modest by nature. But we can leverage that. You can say something like, so you could sell yourself without selling yourself. You could say things along the lines of, since I was fortunate enough to join early, I had a unique perspective. And thankfully, the company trusted me to take advantage of that. So you pretty much, you are humble. You're saying that, hey, there was nothing special. But because I had this experience, I found a way to be useful in not necessarily extraordinary ways, but I did my part in a nice, clever way, which is pretty much the message you want to send, but it's strong.
That's beautiful.
Like it's humble and strong.
Yes.
It's good. Yeah. So I'd say, I'd like to talk about like what's a better word for tooling. You said enablement, but I'm not exactly sure how to bridge from, I was, since I was so early, I was fortunate to be able to work on some very important things like the fine-grained controls for routing, which was pivotal in getting $2.25 billion in SoftBank investing early on. That led to opportunities for me to build core, some word that's not tooling, that enabled
All the engineers.
hundreds of engineers and non-engineers to interactively and automatically ask. So I need to work on that as well. Like how
We're
am I
working on it right
describing
now.
that?
You're doing great.
Yeah,
You're
I
doing
know.
great.
Yeah.
If I were to find a single word replacement for tooling, for tools and tooling, I would say instrumentation. You instrumented the routing code from the inside and around that, so that more and more people could leverage your work.
I instrumented the routing code. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I also, like, during that, I think tooling is a weak word, and I think it was kind of fun that I got to do, like, I got to read research on spatiotemporal graph algorithms and stuff like that. It was a lot of graph analysis. Is there a way to include that?
Yes.
Is that okay?
We need to leverage your humbleness here.
Right.
It's a lot of work deep down there. You're doing scientific research, you're reading papers, you see how this applies. But because you had exposure to this from early on, you know exactly how the company uses that. You have a good sense, a good grip on whether improving this thing by 1% can give the company millions of dollars. Because of that, you're uniquely positioned, so that the company trusted you to do your grindy research. And you were so instrumental in making sure this does benefit the company. Again, if you don't feel comfortable selling yourself, sell the company. But make sure you fit it. You look from the angle which makes you shine as an irreplaceable person who enabled this. I alone can solve is actually a strong term.
Yeah.
You could say it's difficult for me to put this into a short sentence because an academia grade person in me is always trying to bring it up to tons of context. But let me phrase it for you guys to handle this, like to understand. Let me phrase it for you guys so that it's a conversation starter and it's not too nerdy and too technical.
Cool. Okay. Let's try, Alex. Full regalia.
I'm gonna start. Well, I'm gonna start after I think I was one of the first 100 engineers joining so early. I had the opportunity to work on a pivotal piece of fine-grained routing controls that directly led to us getting $2.25 billion in SoftBank investment early on. And then, so from there, what's a good way to link that? Like you're saying, I guess...
Be yourself.
Right.
You liked it. You like being the person who's inside there, right? You did not go to the management track. You did not give a lot of talks and stuff. You like being the researcher who's applying this discoveries of yours, knowing full well how it affects the business. You wanted to stay at that layer, not too high, not too low. You know the impact is big. You know you're the most well positioned person, and you're doing that. That's amazing. People like you are needed by many companies badly.
I'm thinking about like what are good joining words for those though. Like,
so after I've done this,
right,
I had more doors open for me. But I have to confess, I liked staying at the routing layer. I have seen the value before the company could embrace that, and I help unlock it by making sure my tools, my code is run on every single commit. By making sure that we have all these regression tests. We know we're leaving money on the table. We know exactly where we're leaving money on the table. I'll help enable that. I'm throwing out ideas.
I think that's good. I would say this opens some doors for me to do some spatiotemporal graph research to build instrumentation to predict the performance of PRs before they merged, and also to monitor them. I think that which was used by sorry.
I think I got it to a certain degree. You're assuming that Kevin and I are more applied people who are more on the business side, and deep in your heart, you're almost embarrassed that you're talking to us about your research details, which actually drives you. So again, leverage that. You could say that. Thankfully, my desire to to stay in academia with half of my food, reading papers and applying those. Thankfully, this came in extremely handy, as the company needed exactly that, and they let me continue on this track, in like breadth first, not depth first.
Right. So after this, some doors opened up where I was able to apply my research background into spatiotemporal graph analysis and building instrumentation around that was used by hundreds of engineers and non-engineers to
if you struggle, just don't go there. Put more energy into what you started with. Thankfully, my background in spatial graphs made it handy. Came in handy, and much as I enjoyed playing with that, it was also super helpful for the company. And for the next year or so, I was making incremental improvements that drive substantial revenue and brand recognition and whatnot by doing things that I love, making sure the algorithms are better.
Right.
If you're uncertain about like business value, engineers and non-engineers, just don't go there.
Yeah. But the breadcrumbs for your interviewer to follow up on, you got the funding, you got the initial one from the PhD, you got tying in the research, and you got routing. So,
and I think the other important thing is, as Dima mentioned, it's run automatically for every commit, but also I think what's the most important about that is it did drive decision-making at the company, like data-driven decision-making.
Cool.
So it enabled that.
Let's move on to other questions and not get totally sucked into just this.
I want to say one thing here.
Yeah.
Because I just recalled I got this feedback at Microsoft more than 10 years ago. People said I'm a model researcher in terms of approaching problems. And then what I used to say after that for a couple of years that it worked was the following. I like doing research. I like understanding things better. But thanks to this position and this role, this company, I also discovered the side of myself, which has to do with productionizing those. So I kept hands down in terms of being a researcher, but I also embraced the part where I'm the person who's bringing these research results to production, to other people.
That's good, yeah. Bridging the gap between theory and practice kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah.
One good phrase here, by the way, which I also used. Sorry, Kevin, I keep interrupting. One good phrase that I also used a lot back in the day, and it worked, is that I'm positive. I'm shamelessly positive that I speak research. I speak scientific languages better than most engineers, and I speak engineering languages better than most scientists. It's not a high bar to beat, but it sounds about right, and people like those gap bridgers.
Alex, you want to try one where you're not in a mock interview, summing up the stuff that you've learned, not to get it right, not to check all the boxes, but just to make it as different as possible from the last time that you did it in regards to leaving breadcrumbs for your interviewer? Yeah? Yep. No mock interview, just talking.
No mock interview.
Cool.
Okay. So 7 years ago, I finished my PhD in compressed data structures. The highlight there was that I co-invented a graph of DNA fragments that reduced the memory requirement from 300 gigabytes of RAM to 2 gigabytes of RAM, which made complex analysis achievable on commodity hardware. Since then, though, I was working at Cruise. I was one of the first 100 engineers, which gave me the opportunity to work on some core routing fine-grained controls, which directly led to us getting billions of investing from SoftBank. And that gave me some opportunities to apply my research background to build instrumentation. To build instrumentation around spatiotemporal graph analysis, which enabled the company to make data-driven decisions each quarter.
You forgot routing, but that's good.
I said core routing, fine-grained controls.
It's not immediately clear how spatial graphs help Cruise. It is, once you say it helps with better routes. Yeah, that's good.
A lot more follow-up questions could be asked from that. I thought that was great. You got it. You got it?
Sorry, that's really good advice. Like nailing down that and setting up breadcrumbs, because then you get to kind of guide the discussion as well into what you're most proud of and most confident about.
The best ideas are the ones that other people think are theirs, but they're yours. That's what a great intro does.
It's like Inception kind of thing.
Yeah. Getting too much into negotiation tricks, but that's good.
I actually heard an Amazon bar raiser tell me that one time, that he was very proud of an interview he did the other day because every single question in the interview was follow-up questions from the intro. So really, it does actually happen. It is practical.
But let's really practice the breadcrumbs. Like, tell us anything in a way that invites questions that you expect to be asked and want to answer.
But, pick anything from your list and just see if you're leaving a substantial amount of breadcrumbs for follow-up questions.
The thing that I struggle with, Kevin, is that it's hard to think of good examples where I had a conflict in the past with a coworker. Yeah. I think that part of the reason is, I mean, it's probably very rare to like actually have a strong argument with someone.
Correct.
Especially as engineers. But
correct. Can I ask you a question? What is a strong argument in your head?
Like if I walked away swearing about that person or something like that,
if that's the bar, swearing, let's just lower it down from rage to annoyance that persisted over time.
So the other thing, there is an example I have. I think I mentioned this story last time about working with a principal engineer and maybe diving too deep on the contract between dispatch and the vehicle when my deadline was much tighter because I was writing code for the car, which has more strict testing. So the testing window is a lot longer. So the deadline is, the cycle is shorter. And I guess like, it's hard for me to say that it was, yes, I was kind of struggling there. I think there was a disagreement in some sense. It was a disagreement, but I could also definitely see where they were coming from, and I think it was great to have that discussion.
It's a great answer so far.
Let's forget the interview again. Like, tell us plain straight, off the record. Where exactly do you think the principal guy was wrong? Dead wrong.
I think nailing down the contract so early, trying to make it extensible in a certain way, and that particular way would require more code changes if we were adding new event types, which I was trying to avoid that. So I think they were wrong on that, but I also think they were wrong on making such a point of discussing it over and over again when we had to ship an MVP.
Right. So it's primarily about pace of delivery. You're like, dude, I know this has to be launched, and we've done most of the work. Stop blocking us.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I heard it from you, but you never said it. The conflict was not in arguments. The conflict was in balancing teams' interests and product requirements versus some nice architecture or whatnot.
Balancing teams' interests and product requirements versus architecture and resources.
Just competing priorities. Maybe just say competing priorities or a deadline that's different between two different resources.
Different departments, different managers, different interests, they clashed, yeah. It was frustrating because you wanted to ship and you had to spend time arguing that you are allowed to ship this.
Right. So things that I like about this, just not as, I thought that you spoke high level about it. You didn't go into the details too much, which is the common mistake people make when they talk about conflict. The other thing that I liked about this is it's you arguing up. I like that. Even if it's not an argument like we're fist fighting, but still the conflict is with somebody above you in the org. I think that represents you better than if somebody was below you or as a peer. So I do think this could be a good answer. So I'm trying to think, number one, what Dima just got you to say is, what was the problem? Competing interests, between different
between me and
organizations.
a principal engineer on the dispatch team.
Yeah. And again, the sprinkling in of contract, great. But
Yeah.
I want to know what happened at the end. This does not need to be fancy.
Yeah.
It does
So
not need, yeah.
I guess like the thing that happened at the end, and also like what I kind of learned was that I can, like, I do have some authority to be able to say, I hear these concerns. Let's write them down in the design doc as things to look at after the MVP, and I'll continue working on it like this since it's nearly done and we need to ship soon anyway. And so in the end, yeah. Sorry, I was about to like start following the what is it, the star
No,
thing, like the result,
you're
right?
doing great. You're doing great. So
Yeah.
is that what actually happened, or is that what you learned could happen?
No, that's actually what happened as well, but it showed me that it's totally fine to do that. And the principal engineer asked me about design stuff in different projects later, so that was like, I guess I gained some kind of respect by doing that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Like,
I think we
to
want
be
to
honest, like, look, it sounds a bit too personal. As in, I feel like you're trying to defend that person too much. That's okay. That's a good trait. I mean, as a human level, we're aligned here.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
like, consider a mental trick. Imagine you are like at the CTO office. I'm the CTO of Cruise,
Mhm.
and I'm telling you plain straight. You know what? That person, we respect him or her. They're good, but we do have repeated issues that because they want things to be done in some nice way, launches are delayed. And
Mhm.
I'm alarmed that it may be the case with your project. So let's take a sober look. Do you really need me to interfere with your particular interaction with this person to tell them, hey, thank you for your feedback, but we need to launch first? Like
Yeah.
the trick is for you to think that you're not attacking their ego, but you need to give the
Mhm.
best feedback for the company to move forward faster. They would actually appreciate that. Imagine that person needs this feedback, not from you, but from like their skip level. Talk to me as if I'm their skip level to set things straight.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think the good thing that Dima just said there was the lesson that I learned. Like what I did was I realized that the pattern of behavior was to either slow down the launch or continue with the deadline that we set before. I prioritized the deadline. So I thanked the principal engineer for their feedback. I made a process so it would be considered later. And we continued to have that conversation, even though it shipped on time. And that is how I learned, something from that, or even where I learned thanks for the feedback. Like a great thing here is to throw out a resource or a framework that taught you something about dealing with people. Like I'm not saying mention nonviolent communication, but like,
Right.
and I was reading the book. Thanks for the Feedback by Sheila Heen, and I realized like, wow, the deadline here is a lot more important than this request. So I thanked them for their feedback.
Well,
And
would you mind?
one more thing, by the
Yeah.
way, to boost your morale. Uh, Again, you seem to be downplaying this incident, this conflict, because it sounds like in your mind it's minor, it's not worthy of attention, but it's actually a staff level conflict. That's
Hmm.
the majority of conflicts senior engineers deal with are of lower magnitude than this one. You could totally answer with this story at a staff level interview. So you're downplaying it as if it's something minor, but
Dima,
you will be
how would he say
gone.
it? So he's making it seem like it as major as it was. What would a staff level engineer interview answer maybe sound like in this
Can I
case?
give some context as well? Like, sorry to interrupt, but it was a very important project. We were in the news for crowding intersections, and the CEO tasked multiple teams with reducing those crowding events by tenfold. And I mean, so we had eyes from the CEO, so it was also very
High
important
visibility.
to, right, high visibility. So I'm not, yeah, I just wanted to say that because,
That framing is important for this answer because
yeah,
that gives you the right to do anything that you want. Right? Check it out. CEO gave me a task. Principles in my ear. I go with what the CEO is saying.
Mhm.
I learned a lesson about dealing with people up the chain and thanking them for their feedback, but then going on with the,
right.
I think that's it. Personally.
And the
Dima.
lesson is good too.
Yeah.
As in, look,
Yeah.
look, fundamentally, you arrive at the conclusion that is exactly right. Hey, I've realized I have enough power, and I can use the right arguments to convince people way above me. I don't need authority for that. I can just talk my way out. That this presents you as an uber senior person. All I was trying to say, I hear you, Kevin. We can try the like senior staff level framing. But all I'm trying to say in terms of like one-to-one mentoring is you need to believe that this incident, that this conflict is real. As in, you need to believe that people who can resolve this conflict at least as well as you do are already above the senior level. You don't need to downplay it as if it's not worth mentioning, but there was this person with whom I had a fight, but thankfully I found the right words and the issue was reduced to diminishing, so we didn't have to bother delaying lunch.
Okay, so to give him a comparison, so that's the one that would be one way, and then what would be another way that he could do it, like clearly juxtaposing them.
So yeah, if the mid-level ways also we had this problem, this annoyance, and we found the right terms to postpone it so that it doesn't delay the launch. Thankfully, my manager interfered, and we managed to push the plan up. I think the like uber senior way would be that I knew this product is high priority. It was clear. It's not just a random launch. It's something that is all over the news. We have a particular issue. The press is looking into it. People on Twitter are raging that we crowd intersections. A particular specific issue. We have a fix for that, and we had to articulate that whatever best practices you guys may have planned for that, we appreciate them. We need to launch them. But in terms of priorities, it's crystal clear that I can lay out a strong argument that all those concerns can wait. And I did lay out that argument, and it worked. And then the person thanked me later, and it was a good feedback session afterwards. But the launch was not delayed. My manager didn't have to interfere. I just talked to the principal person, and somehow miraculously they said, "You guys go ahead. That's important."
All right, Alex, your version of that, not mock interview style, whenever you're ready.
There was a really big, very public issue that Cruise was facing in the media. I don't know if you remember it, but very often Cruise cars would kind of bunch up in an intersection and block traffic. And we're getting slammed on Twitter about that. And the DMV was threatening to revoke our license. And so the CEO tasked multiple teams with reducing these crowding events by tenfold. And we needed to do it before this check-in to, about our license. So I knew it was a very important issue, but I was being blocked by a principal engineer in the, I guess it doesn't matter, but blocked by a principal engineer on the dispatch team who wanted to keep discussing details about the contract between dispatch and the vehicle for how we would send these messages. So the design I was proposing would avoid updating code, and that would let it be more extensible in the future. But besides that, he raised some good points, but it was threatening the timeline on the project. So I thanked him for his suggestions, and I said, let's write it down in the design doc for something to do after the MVP. And then I delivered the MVP on time, and later that principal engineer thanked me for that, and would subsequently ask me to discuss other things about contracts between things or other things about his designs.
You don't have to end on it.
I don't
complete
that,
You can just say, "This person thanked me for that. We made good friends.
Yeah.
All good."
The person thanked me for that, and we've had some great discussions about that sort of thing since then. We're good friends. Do I need to say like what I learned from that, or
even your voice? By the way, remember that exercise from the last time when you started speaking.
So confident.
You were so strong. Yeah.
Fuck.
Like the contrast was dramatic.
I'm trying to pinpoint when it was that you lost that. It was at the beginning. It was when you started talking about the conflict itself, not the background. When you're talking about the background, you were like, "This is how it is," and then you got to the conflict. You're like, I think this is how it is. I'm not
And the
really.
interesting part, by the way, sorry for interrupting, but I wanted to be very clear. When you said, I guess it doesn't matter, you did not lose it. It was actually natural and good. In your mind, you may think that you're like, losing it. You played it so well.
Dude, this is what I was trying to tell you. Say it again, Alex.
Sorry, I'm trying to understand what Dima just said. Like me saying, I guess it doesn't matter.
About the team that person was on, because this is what I was trying to tell you guys off camera.
I see, yeah.
Written speech sounds different than spoken speech. No one would ever write that down in a written speech.
Mm-hmm.
Written speech in an interview is a way to get a red flag from an interviewer. When you say stuff like what you just said, people say, wow, he's really talking to me right now. So you think it's a mistake to say, oh, I guess it doesn't matter what team he was on. But it's actually a bonus point, a small bonus point, but a bonus point. I think that's what Dima is saying, I think, in his own words.
One thing real quick before I forget, speaking about strong words, you keep bringing up that you've been one of the first 100 engineers at the company. It doesn't sound as strong as you think it does, because people have no idea how big the company is. The strong argument would be that by the time you were leaving, you were in the first 5%. And Google had this tool called percent, so you could look up your own percentage. If you could say it playfully, like as Kevin says, not a written speech, natural speech. We know we had this tool that shows you how many people, which percentage of people or engineers or overall in the company joined after me. And after my year 3 or so, I was way past the median. And by the time I was leaving the company, I was in the top 5%, in the first 5%. So of 20 people in the company, 19 joined after me. I'm more senior in tenure than 19 out of 20 people. That's a far stronger statement than saying we had 100 people, under 100 to like 1,500 or whatnot.
Yeah.
I agree. That's beautiful. All right. Do we want to do anything more on this one, or do we want to move on? I think this one's a lot better.
Do you think that story is, I mean, it sounds like you guys think this is a good story for when I had a disagreement with someone, or I had a conflict with a coworker, or I got pushback.
Darn right. I do.
Sweet. Nice.
Honestly, in terms of helping you, I feel like we're flexing your muscles, and we've flexed enough on this particular thread meeting. Yeah. So any other topic is going to be more impactful per unit of time compared to going here further.
But that could be a senior or staff level answer, is what Dima said earlier.
Absolutely.
That's how I feel about it too.
Apologies about not saying this explicitly. Yes,
especially with that piece, Alex, about how important it was and the direct connection. I don't know if you saw it in the news. I don't know if you remembered this, but there was a huge problem. Like, people hear that and they're like, "Oh my God, there was a huge problem." So,
and they threatened to revoke the license. That's also super strong.
The V part,
off topic, but it's important. I forgot where I read it, but there was Kevin, I'm sure you would know that because it's in your neighborhood. There was a story when they tried to predict whether the candidate gets an offer or not 40 years ago, super old. They had black and white like tape cameras. And they wanted to see, so they recorded the interview, video and sound. Then they replay this to like non-engineers or whatnot. And the prediction success rate was like 90%.
What?
They said, fine, no, doesn't matter, ignore it, not my story. Like maybe 60, I don't care. Then they said, you know what, we're gonna remove the sound. The prediction success rate was still good enough.
Wow.
We're going to make it black and white. We're going to make it lower quality. Ultimately, they got down to like the person entering the room, saying their name and sitting down. And even from this part alone, literally 15 seconds, you could already predict quite well whether it's going to be yes or no. Posture matters. Confidence matters.
If they would get an offer, just from the first 15 seconds in the room.
Without sound, literally.
Yeah.
Confidence matters.
What if engineers don't believe that, Dima? What if engineers say, "Oh, yeah, that's just what is that, body language? Who cares? What should I stand up straight? What do I do with that information?" What would you say to them?
I would say that engineers tend to be nerds. You guys tend to be like mathematically inclined and logically thinking. You underestimate the population you're compared to. You only need to outdo an average other candidate, not some perfect candidate you can think of for the level you're applying. And it's an advice. You can take it or not take it, but it's a low-hanging fruit. And the market is tight these days. So chances are, unlike 3, 4, 5 years ago, these days, a lot of people have practiced for that. So if you don't, you're just short-circuiting yourself. Like you're handicapping yourself for no good reason whatsoever.
Another thing you mentioned when we met, Dima, was that I should probably do behavioral interviews in person. I think that was like because I'd give off a more confident energy, or you could see it better, or something like that.
It's not about how it's perceived. I think it's about the mode you enter. You're far more open in person.
Yeah.
You're like, compared to most people, don't get me wrong, most people, it takes more effort and more practice to open up over video calls. But this delta between in person and video, for you, it's way above average. So on a relative scale compared to the population, it's more to your benefit to do in-person interviews if you can make it happen.
Nice.
Yep.
All right. Al, what else you got question-wise? That was a perfect question because it was what you were struggling with, and I thought it was great. But you have any other ones that you might?
Yeah, I guess driving things forward, like that theme.
Okay.
So, and I think maybe I talked about this last time as well, but
But okay, so this one is about like, tell me about a time that you've moved projects
driven
forward.
something forward. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that kind of thing. Cool.
So not in mock interview mode.
Great.
Yeah. When we started scaling our service to have thousands of requests every day across 4 cities, I was friends with someone in the product team, and I was asking them what kind of complaints do we get from customers the most. And it turns out that they complain the most about the route time and the pickup and drop off locations. And San Francisco has these like one-way streets. So if you're picked up just a few meters away, like on the other side or a different part of the corner, that can cut a route down by up to 15 minutes even. So, I mean, usually it's like 5 minutes or something, but that's still pretty big. And that also applies to wait time because it applies to the route from whichever car is available. And so I felt like we could tackle that all together. And I suggested it to my manager, and he said that we shouldn't do that because I think there was an issue with how the architecture existed at the time where we couldn't send customly selected pickup and drop off locations to the vehicle, or we could, but they wouldn't be used somehow. And it was going to take a lot of work to change that. But I felt like it would still be worthwhile to investigate. So I built a simulation that would snap to the nearest, I'd use real Uber and Lyft data to like get realistic trips and snap to the nearest pickup and drop off locations at each end. And then this is a very naive method, but I'll just route between all of them and return the best route. And I showed that, I presented that actually at in the all hands at the end of the week, and showed that by doing this, by selecting a good pickup and drop off location, we can improve both the route time and the wait time by 17% without affecting the walking distance for people, but like substantially, like maybe a meter or something. And that was enough to get buy-in from a whole org, I can't remember the name, but a whole org that changed the priority for the next quarter. It was around quarterly planning, so that was handy. And actually ended up getting not a patent, but we applied for a patent on a multimodal route optimization algorithm. So yeah,
this is real good. Like, yeah, the only part I would cut it slightly shorter because towards the end you were always trying to fill time. Yeah, this was real good, and you were confident from the first moment. Yeah. I almost feel like, you know what, I would add, and I'm totally serious. Given how naturally it was flowing, I would even, like, if I'm interviewing, if I'm you, I would even say up front, you know that part when you have to cross the street and the routing algorithm has no idea about one-ways? That's what Uber notoriously sucks with, and we could fix that. I would totally say that.
Unless I'm interviewing with Uber or something.
Well, yeah.
Or maybe I should. I don't know.
If I was interviewing with Uber, I'd be like, that really challenging thing on the app where blah blah
You
blah.
guys struggle with?
No, that
Yeah.
some companies struggle with. That some companies struggle with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did something about that here. So
That's good. Yeah.
So I had a few notes. You had several again
Tips and confidence.
spoken speech asides to yourself. I can't remember the name. Usually it's like 5 minutes, but
I can't remember the name of the org.
those are
Yeah,
natural.
5 minutes,
Those are natural speaking qualities that are nice to hear from your interviewer, and it means for yourself. That's a clue. I'm speaking like a real person, not reciting some bullshit I wrote down last week, which was great. It was great to see you do that more times than you've done that in any other answer. That was a example of your confidence. I was also kind of on that idea of what Dima said about being able to predict if you would get an offer or not just based on your visuals and not hearing. And I noticed when you were up close like this, I was like, and your words were less. But when you were back like this, it was better. And then you looked to this side to think about what you and your manager were talking about. And I've never seen you look to this side.
Wait, which side?
There. Yeah. When you did that, you were like off in the distance, like really. And I've been with you now for like 3.5, 6 hours, and I've never seen you look there. So again, just little things to notice that when you're doing them, maybe it's a good sign for you. Those little asides to yourself and really looking that way. I'm not saying do them on purpose. I'm saying notice.
Right. That's like really good. Like while I do that, like I kind of think, oh shit, like it looks like I don't know how to answer or something like that, but it's good to hear that that's actually,
you look
it makes
like
it more
JFK.
natural.
You're like looking off into the horizon. Like, dude, don't you know, like in movies when they squint and I'm gonna get those guys. That's always the sexy thing. So don't worry about how that looks. There's archetypal stuff that's in our histories and myths that say important people are looking off into the distance thinking. So don't worry about that. It changed the priority for next quarter. Great. That's like, I think you can lean into that a little bit more. Those are my notes.
Yeah, honestly, I think you picked it. That was an amazing story. So it just occurred to me that I almost forgot that you sort of prepared it. It was so natural that, like, if you would tell me that, you know what, of like 10 stories, these 2 are the ones I prepared, I would not point to this one. That's how naturally it flowed. So yeah, in terms of looking in some other weird places, again, muscle memory. Muscle memory in terms of self-presentation is observance. Is you're aware of those small subtle things you do. It's like when you like try karate, you realize that and like the first 10 times I've done it. I'm actually aware where my foot lands, or where the toe is facing. That's good. Once you start looking there, it means your big rocks are in the right place. If you are concerned about looking at different places, you can use the trick I co-invented. External camera, put it lower. No kidding.
Put this camera.
So usually my camera is quite high, but when I want to be more confident, I lower the rest. So my eyes would be looking above the camera level. Right now, looking slightly below. I think you're looking for, like, honestly, if you just want to look higher, make a screen smaller and put the pictures closer to the camera. This simple trick does miracles. Oh yeah, speaking of miracles, if you're too uneasy that you're talking to a real person, make them smaller. That's an amazing trick.
That's interesting. I'm doing that right now. I'm not uneasy, but I'm just like testing it out.
Wait, what do you guys mean? Make them smaller?
Resize the window?
Makes the window smaller. So your portrait is not occupying 1/3 of the screen.
Yeah. If it's full screen, sometimes it's like a lot. It's like a lot.
It's intimidating.
Yeah. But if I make you guys like 1 inch tall, you guys aren't as scary if you're 1 inch tall, you know?
Exactly,
What do you got, Al?
If you ever talk to some jerk who has authority, make them super small. No kidding. That's how life works.
What do you got, Al?
I had some questions. Like, Dima mentioned that the story was a bit long, and I felt like the end, I didn't really have an end that kind of wrapped it up.
Yeah.
And I just kind of said, so that's that, or whatever I said.
Well,
And the other thing is, like, should I say some kind of lesson? Is like, I learned that people aren't gonna. I mean, it pays to do a prototype and get some data, like a very rough prototype and get some data to get buy-in.
It won't come naturally.
Yeah.
Like you're not the person who's. Sorry, it may sound condescending. I don't mean it up front, but your natural confidence is with what you do with your hands, and you like it. I think you would write good blog posts in terms of what we've learned, but it doesn't. Your natural mode of operation doesn't contain that part. So the lessons learned would be you would get away from your speaking self to your writing self, and the interview is about your speaking self. Honestly, whenever you feel like you're struggling, whenever you feel like you're out of steam, just end it playfully. Like, yeah, that was it, and I'm quite proud about how it happened, how it went, and we made tons of good progress based on this. So
yeah, and
that's good.
Yeah, like what we were saying earlier, where you want them to have breadcrumbs. This one, if you look at it in the traditional story structure, beginning, middle, and end, the beginning of, hey, you know that problem on most apps? This was the most common problem for us. Everybody hears that and they go, wow, that's amazing. The middle was, I told my boss, they didn't really see it that way. So I made a prototype and showed it all hands. The end is, it changed the priority for the next quarter for another org that was really interested in seeing us implement this. To me. So as long as you know the beginning and the middle and the end, then you stick the landing because you put a period at the end of the sentence. So if you know that ahead of time, then land on it. And if like you don't, because you're riffing or it's a question you've never heard before or something that you didn't prepare, then you can do what Dima says, which is like, and that's pretty much it, but but I was super proud of that project because I learned a ton about, prototypes, whatever.
That's good.
Yeah.
Another phrase to remember. I'll be super quick. Another phrase to remember is, you know what? I can talk about this for hours. So if you're interested, we can dive into the specific questions.
That makes you that's speaking with authority. That's a great example of speaking with authority. Yeah.
That is good. Yeah. The thing I was going to say is I've noticed that I've done maybe like a couple of mock behavioral interviews. I've noticed that some interviewers seem relatively dogmatic about you sticking to a kind of star template and also having a takeaway. It seems to be like the advice that everyone gives. And I know that you guys have discussed that previously. So like, how do you, if someone's looking for that, especially, like what do you recommend?
Sorry. So that's the same as people being dogmatic about all the things you should study about system design in a system design mock that you only say to candidates that you didn't think did a good job.
Yeah.
So first of all, yes, it's dogma. Maybe we're as wrong as they're wrong, but all they want is a well-structured answer that is a good story. And the only framework they're familiar with how to do that is STAR. So they say that. Just like the only thing in a system design interview they know that you're supposed to do is go through the requirements, do a high-level design, and do a deep dive. And the only way they know how to do that is Alex Yu's book, designing system design interviews. So they'll throw that out as a framework. So my takeaway would be that's their de facto answer to try to be helpful. But mainly it's because they were not satisfied with the answers I was giving. And they weren't maybe having gone as deep to be able to investigate and tell you why without mentioning another framework that they didn't.
Yeah, I think you summarized that pretty well in the post that you wrote like recently about saying that crutches are useful to stand up, but eventually they'll be a hindrance when you develop the skill, so yeah.
Yeah, and senior people aren't doing that. They're like above senior people are not using the STAR framework. And if they are, you cannot tell. If they are, it's invisible.
Let me emphasize your point and frame it. So first of all, I'm going to make a strong statement. If your interviewer is asking you, okay, so I heard the story, what did you learn from there? And if you can predict it, you already are above them. Like they are sticking to their safety mechanisms, and you see when they will do it. Like in terms of like martial arts, right? Aikido, you're using their strength against them. If you know that's going to happen, in a way, it's in your best interest to stop, prepare for 10 seconds because you know what they're going to ask you, right? And then you lead with a confident answer. So that's one thing. And number two, yeah, again, in terms of posture, self presentation, if they are the person who need this structure, well, feel sorry for them. It's not that they're forced to, it's that they lack the capacity and skill to do without. So help them. View this as you mentoring them. You know, like it's a standard, it's a well-known thing today. It's not even, people don't hide it. It's true that if the candidate is too weak, what interviewers should do is go into like mentoring mode. So at least we learn something together. Just it's a positive conversation. You have to mentor that person because they're incapable of running the conversation smoothly. So lend them a hand. They would appreciate it, and it's going to be reflected on your score eventually.
Yeah.
Nice.
Were those paid? I'm just curious. The mocks.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, I think behaviorals are the most misunderstood and the highest likelihood of having a weak interviewer, personally. So that's a piece of it. But for all the great ones that I've talked to, never heard them give that feedback. So it is a mediocrity flag for me.
Well, I didn't do like I feel like I'm doing a lot better today. So I can see why they would say that, given the answers that I gave.
You needed structure.
Right.
Before. And today you got different structure. But yeah. Are there any
Yes.
other ones you want to do? Maybe
I'm really thinking out loud. Like, why would as an interviewer, why would I ever ask like point blank, what was the lesson you've learned? I would even if that's what I'm curious about, I would tailor it to your answer. I would like, okay, so what would you do differently? Okay, so if you have to work with this person in the future, or how would you identify people with whom you need the special attention? I would try to play on what you said, as opposed to just
And you would ask that, right? You'd be interested. Like, you wouldn't be like, well, he didn't say a lesson. He didn't say how that changed his view or the way he engineers. So
no,
I'm going to mark him down.
No, that's dogmatic too. So that is somewhat popular advice for all of your answers to give what you would do differently or what lesson you learned. But that's not the standard across companies or people. Can you do that? Yes. Do you have to? Absolutely not. I think that it's a good practice only because the reason why it's cool is that it's one of the most common follow-up questions. What would you do differently? If you had to do that over again, how would you interact with that person differently? So if you preempt it in your answer, you are saving them time. But again, candidates getting marked down because they didn't do that for every question, that's very formulaic. That doesn't seem realistic. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but Alex, the last answer you gave was so good. It was so good. It's like we could already end here and you can feel really good about it. But I'm wondering if you want to ride the wave one more time for any of the other ones that you have, even though
I'm feeling pretty good. Those are the main ones. Like,
you did great.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys did too. But yeah, those are the main ones that I was having trouble with, I think. So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Cool. Big lessons. We want to go through lessons for the day. I would say, I think that there's something in what Dima said earlier. It was something like using the kind of humility that you maybe leaned into in Japan of like, I think that there's something there where you can find your way to be confident through understatement, which is different than just lacking confidence, but saying like, well, you know, the company asked me to do this and I wasn't too sure, but it seemed to have like a really cool impact. I think that there's something there to investigate that would give you an actual door to go through to be confident in a realistic way. But super, super senior answers this time. There was nothing under the bar for me. Dima, was there anything that was under the bar of like what you'd want to see out of a senior level person this time? Honestly,
I'm tempted to say that it would be nice to cut the part where you were struggling quietly. But again, that's today's practice. That's all good.
Yeah.
You need some trick or two to handle those. Some trick or two. Like, let me collect my thoughts. let me phrase it so that it doesn't go too much of tangent, whatever. But really, don't worry about that.
Yeah, but besides the quiet parts, pretty much like, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe last time, maybe 20% of the time, it was clearly presenting at the level he wanted to be seen at. And maybe this time, I would say it's more like 80% at least presenting at the level he wanted to be seen at. 2 thumbs up from everybody, I think.
Thanks.
Interestingly, though, by the way, now that I think about it, after you're quiet, you are quite collected. So maybe there's something you need in this quietness. Get yourself some beverage so that you can buy yourself time.
Dude, yeah. Give yourself little tricks so you can be quiet and have some kind of activity. I think that's great. I think that's great.
Off camera, even lying is fine. Like, let me answer the door. Must be pizza. Like, literally. If that's what stands between you and the offer, I wouldn't judge you for that.
And you have to keep going back and getting more pizza every time they ask you a question. Dude, this guy loves pizza. He's a great culture fit.
This guy's got a... Sorry.
Last time you mentioned posture as well. So today I moved my couch back so I have more room, and I also like set my standing desk up so I'm like standing instead. So I don't know if that's helped at all.
It shows, yeah.
Yeah, bro.
I'm actually practicing sitting. I know I'm far confident when I'm standing, but right now I'm sitting specifically to practice.
Nice.
Yeah. Cool, man. I thought you might have thought you were underprepared, but I think that this was like, if we say last time was Alex number 1 and this time was Alex number 2, there's a pretty clear difference between the two people. And again, to your point, it's not really about preparation at that point. It's about knowing, like, do I know what I want to say? Do I believe in what I'm going to say? And
that's the big one. Yeah,
myself while I'm saying it. Those little asides where you're like, I don't really remember what department they were in. That's because you're enjoying yourself. You're not saying that for the interviewer. You're saying that for you. You're like, I guess it doesn't really matter. Like, so I thought that you went through that checklist, even though not consciously. As somebody listening to your stories, it was nice to see, man. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Before we go totally off the record, what was the framework again? The three points.
You got to know what you're going to say. You got to believe in it, and you got to enjoy it.
My favorite is the believe in it thing.
Yeah,
I like it too.
Yeah.
For me, it usually comes in that order, though. Like, if I find myself saying something and it's not sounding confident, it's like, oh, do I believe in what I'm saying? Yeah, I actually do. Oh, no, I don't. This is a lie. I shouldn't. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say it. But then once I believe it, it's like, okay, is there, in acting, they call it having a sense of ease or effortlessness. So it's kind of like knowing what you say gives you structure. Knowing what you say gives you structure. Believing in it gives you passion. And then enjoying it gives you this kind of grace. Because ultimately, like the smartest, most confident, intellectual people, there is that hint of effortlessness. So, yeah, that's how I think about it, at least. Yeah. All right, gents. On that note, let's turn off the camera.
Sounds good.
Very nice.